Hello friends and welcome to Sequin Girly Creates. It's lovely to have you here, whether you are a new or existing subscriber, welcome. Sequin Girly Creates is about my creative journey in creating the wardrobe that I love, the life that I love, lots of sewing but lots of other things too. Today's episode is one of those other things, and this may or may not be for you, so I completely understand that not everyone will want to watch this episode. So I'd just like to say today's vlog is about my journey to deciding I wanted a breast reduction and then having a breast reduction, and now being nearly a year later on that. First of all, I would like to say this is not a vlog that is sponsored by anyone. This is not ad or PR. And this is also not a vlog where I'm trying to persuade anyone on what they should do. This is just me sharing my journey. I have always had a larger chest. I'm only 5'2". I was 5'2" when I was 13 and never got any taller. So I used to be tall, and then everyone else carried on and I stopped. I remember once getting measured and realising that my cup size was way bigger than I thought it was. And then through my life, I've dipped in and out of being properly measured, buying decent bras, buying not. And then probably since I've been about 30, have really properly invested in the right size bra, because I couldn't find things that were comfortable or holding me up. Prior to my 30s, I have to say I bought a lot of minimizers, and they didn't really minimize, do they? But at least they just sort of fit. And then I started going to shops that had the actual right size that I need. And the other thing that happened is the older I got, the bigger I got. Now, no one tells you that when you're young. You think you reach a certain size when you're an adult, and you kind of stay that way, apart from a bit of fluctuation if you had children or weight loss and gain. You don't really expect once you're an adult. What I began to realise is, however static my weight was, my chest got bigger. And I looked into it and it wasn't any particular medication doing it or anything like that. So I actually asked my doctor and she said it just happens to some people. And I was like, oh. But by the time I'd asked my doctor, I'd already been working for a few years on, self-love of my body. And it's a big thing these days to talk about self. Sort of really purport that for a while self-love was about having to love every part of yourself, but actually a lot of people have spoken more recently, and I agree with this. It's not about loving every part, it's about acceptance, it's about kind self-talk, and it's not about like hate or revulsion in a way, because what I realise is you can be nonplussed about a part of your body and that's okay. I'm a bit nonplussed about my thighs. I don't love them, but I also don't look in the mirror every day and hate them. I have a tattoo on my thigh which helps with that and was intentional. I'm not showing you that today, but it was an intentional thing to give me something that made me smile. And I think the other thing that people often don't tell you when you're younger is that as you get older, you can feel to an extent that your body is almost getting away from you and you're losing control. And that can be a little bit scary too. I just got to this point where I felt so heavy and pulled down. And then it reached the point where there was only sort of two places where I could buy a bra, and I was beyond M&S sizes, and they do a really good range, but I couldn't buy them in there. So I was spending sort of 40-ish pounds on each bra because I had no choice. The proportion around my back size to, like, they talk about in sewing the difference between apex and all of that and everything. It was just so out of proportion that I actually spoke to my doctor when I started talking about HRT to my doctor, and she agreed that it was something we should try and pursue through the NHS if I felt comfortable. And I'd looked it up, I'd read about it, but I'd never said it out loud. And saying it to my doctor was the first time I said it out loud. So saying it out loud at home to the person I live with was quite tricky, because it was kind of like, once I say it out loud, that's the acknowledgement that this is real, that I really feel this way. Now I realise that self-love, self-acceptance, all of those different things can be coupled with saying, I am super uncomfortable in my body and I need to do this for me, and I don't have to justify it in any other way than this is what I need for me. So I did my research, I got some recommendations, I read lots of reviews, and I went and met with a doctor who did this, and I felt incredibly comfortable in how realistic he was, how realistic he was, how sort of practical, how sort of methodical everything was. And for me, those things are good signs when I'm talking and listening. And I felt heard as well, but also was given a realistic view and explained things like the scars, etc. Now, I wasn't doing this so I could be on an OnlyFans page or to turn back time or get back a body from a different part of my life. None of that was what motivated me. But his questions included things like, have you discussed it with the person at home and how they will feel about your body being different? Do you realise, that you will have scars? I was shown scars. So I felt very, very comfortable in the real thought behind the psychological and the physical side of what was happening. And so I made the decision to go ahead with the surgeon, and it was all booked, and there were like pre-appointments, and if you are someone that's thinking about doing this, you need to be prepared to be topless in rooms with multiple people. There was always a chaperone there. You need to be prepared to be photographed. You need to be prepared to be drawn on. So lots of measurements with rulers and all sorts of things. So you've just got to be prepared for all of that. Now, because of the fact that I was on the really far spectrum of size, I was also made aware of realistically how small I could go down to in a safe and an appropriate way. So the size I am now, which is a 32E/F, you might still say, whoa, that's quite big. But for me, I have dropped 7 bra sizes. And the surgeon was always very clear with me that I would never get to a small size, because that would be harmful for me to go from such an extreme. And he said I was already one of the people that would see the most dramatic impact on what he was doing. So he was very realistic from day one about what I could expect to be afterwards. I was given incredibly clear instructions about size of like recovery bra that fastened at the front to buy, etc. So I got those and all of the things that were needed. And so I had my operation last October on Halloween, and I was in the hospital for a good few hours beforehand, and because it's the same as any operation with general anaesthetic, the no eating, no food, all of that business. I'd had bloods and all the stuff done beforehand, and my advice, if you're like me with tiny veins, I made sure I was super hydrated to make it easy to get everything into me. On the day of the operation, I arrived well in advance, and the surgeon came round and used 3 colours of Sharpie pens to draw all his surgical lines and marks on me, to draw around where my nipple was, where it would be. So lots to, as I said, you've got to be prepared for that. So sat topless. I was given an estimate of about 4 to 5 hours for the operation. It was 5 hours long, and I was told it would be an overnight stay and that they wouldn't want to release me until they were happy that A, had recovered well from the general anaesthetic, and B, because of the huge difference from before and after with mine, that if there was any internal bleeding or anything. The team was brilliant. I went under very quickly the general anaesthetic. I'm a big believer that if you're going to do something like this, you need to trust the people there, because if you don't, you're going to be anxious, and that's not going to help with recovery from general anaesthetic, etc. You know, this is their job. They don't want it to fail. They want it to go right, and I chose them because I felt comfortable with them, and so I gladly went under the general anaesthetic, almost to a point of just excited for what was coming after the event. I remember waking up in the recovery room, and they were quite surprised how quickly I was talking and awake. Those of you who know me, probably not. And then back to the room. Now, I had drains put in because I lost 2 kilograms of weight from my chest. It was about 1.1 something on one side and 0.9 on the other, and that was quite a huge amount. So they put drains in to make sure that there was not any fluid buildup or anything. So I had one coming out under each arm when I woke up. That was the trickiest bit while being in the hospital, is not catching the drains. I was also extremely padded and plastered up, and they'd already put me in the recovery bra as well. That's bizarre, thinking about someone putting that on you while you're asleep. Don't think about it. So through the night, regularly checked my drains, checked my pulse, checked that I was coming, and the following morning was encouraged to shower. Now, showering for at least the first 2 weeks was just to allow water to trickle over and not to rub anything. There was still a few Sharpie pen marks on me, and then to just leave on, there was plaster type over every incision, but apart from that, everything else was then gone. They were happy, so I went home, and the drains had come out because there was nothing really coming into the drains, which they were happy about as well. This was the movement I had to avoid, because if you think that would open an incision. I was given paracetamol. I was given a stronger medication if I needed it, but told if I don't need it, don't take it, and not to take ibuprofen for a while. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't uncomfortable, because it was. It wasn't painful, in an extreme pain, but it was super uncomfortable. Trying to fall asleep at night, I struggle a bit with sleep anyway, was really uncomfortable. I found that what I needed to do personally was have a pillow either side to rest my arms on, because the most uncomfortable was my sides. And I discussed this with the surgeon, and the surgeon said to me, it's a really common thing, yet actually nothing has happened on your sides. There's no cuts, there's no incisions, and he can only think it's where you pull things across. But that was the most sore for the longest. The most uncomfortable was all down my sides. And for the whole 2 weeks, they were the worst part. I followed his instructions. He said by the end of week 1, you should be going for a really small walk. I have never had an operation that required stitches. So for me, my biggest fear was damaging the stitches and bursting something open. So I was probably a bit more cautious than anyone out there who'd had a cesarean or anything like that and knew what it was like. But for me, by week 2, I was doing a little bit of work here and there on my laptop and sort of shuffling about up the street, trying to get moving. He did say by the end of week 2, people could be out walking their dogs. I don't have checkups and appointments. So I was called by the doctor the next day, by the surgeon the next day at home, check how I was. There was, I can't remember, it was a 1-month appointment, and then another one, and then a 6-month appointment. So I was very regularly checked in on. It was after a certain amount, one of the appointments, all the tape was taken off and replaced, and I was told not to take it off. And then after a certain amount of appointments, I can't remember, he then took them off and told me to leave them off. He was very particular about that, based on research and them helping things heal better. So I just went with it. But I tell you what, by week 2 and week 3, the itching. Now, I don't know if the itching is common of all incisions healing, but my goodness, the itching, that was one of the hardest parts for me, was because of course you cannot itch them, but the itching of the incisions. Now, I knew it was a good thing. I checked with him, but it was so itchy. Also, but was tender, and I did make sure for those first 2 weeks I really rested up. None of this arm lifting and moving around, because there was bruising, and they were rock solid as well, and slightly swollen. And what you see after the op and for the first month or so is definitely not what you will be like eventually. I had lots of bruising here and some under here and here. I personally chose to use arnica. You do what's right for you and what your doctors and everything says, but I chose to do that to help with the bruising. Yeah, and then life started to get back to normal with my level of movement and activity. And suddenly one day I was walking around town, and I nearly had a cry because I suddenly realised how light I felt. And it was a lightness that I didn't know how to describe. I was walking around and I just felt like something overwhelmed with, because I'd got past the feeling fragile and things were less rock solid and less swollen. I was just quite taken aback by it, actually. And then a few weeks later I ran for a crossing, like the man was beeping like to cross the road, and I ran and I didn't have to hold anything down, and that was quite sort of took me back as well. And then of course I started being able to put clothes on and comparing clothes, how they looked before and after. Warning, not everything looks after as amazing as it looked before. You can think that, oh, my clothes will fit great, they'll all look wonderful. Actually, some clothes just fit differently and didn't look right anymore. So do mentally prepare yourself for the fact that not everything is like a magic, like, yay! I was a little bit surprised actually by some things just looking like they swamped me, which had looked quite nice on me before. So it was all, yeah, there was a lot of things going on. I'm just glad that I sewed. At one point I had this mountain of clothes that I needed to adjust to enjoy them. But there were other clothes that I put on, and I loved that the collar wasn't pulling down on my neck anymore and making me feel heavy. And I love that I don't have to put a bra on. Now, there is some consequence of this that I wasn't expecting, a positive and a negative. So I'm going to tell you them both because I want to be realistic with you. Let's do the negative first. I have got some discoloration of my skin where the scars are. I'm on my way to 50 and I didn't do this for cosmetic reasons, so I'm not bothered. He has told me that I could have it lasered. I'm not going to, because I'm not frightened or bothered about the fact that I can see what I'd had done to my body, but that's what's happened to my healing. It's healed well. I've got no lumpy bits or anything like that, but just some discoloration. The scars are still not all gone. I do still look a little bit Frankenstein-y in places, but everything is healed well, but I have got a little bit of discoloration, but I'm okay with that. The positive is, like I was just talking about, I have the chest of a 20-year-old in terms of not needing to wear a bra all the time. I'd never thought about that beforehand, and it was never part of what I wanted to do. I'll leap up or I'll jog to the bus. I feel so much lighter, and that lightness is not being pulled down. I am now 11 months into the journey. Things are still healing. There hasn't been any discomfort or anything like that for some time. There's still, as I say, healing of the scars, etc. And I say I'm glad I didn't overdo it at the beginning, because it's a major thing that had happened to my body and I needed to give my body time. And I got a bit frustrated. I was like, I've rested now, I want to get on. But you've just got to be patient with your body. And I have no regrets about doing it, but that's me and that's not you, and that's the journey that I happen to go on, and that is not me telling you to do this, because you must do your own research and be realistic about it, and also really look into it yourself. There is no way, shape or form that I'm advocating anybody else's decision. And well, I don't know, was that helpful? I don't know, but I'm there you go. That's me talking about it, because I know that I mention it often and it might be helpful. And the lady who reached out to me on Instagram did say that maybe it might be helpful. So there you go. I won't, in the comments, you are welcome to comment, but if you've got more deeper questions about your own personal journey, I'd just like to say, please reach out to me on Instagram, send me a DM. I'm Sequin Girly on Instagram, and I'm happy to chat if you want to ask me things, but I probably wouldn't get into that chat in the comments. That's what I would just say. So I hope you have a good week, and I'll see you for Sewing Chat again soon.